Hello everyone, my name is Courtney Brown and I'm a marketing manager here at Enterprise DB. I'll be your host today for our webinar, New Strategies for Database Modernization. I'm joined by Ken Rugg, EDB's Chief Product and Strategy Officer. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. We'll be sharing the recording along with the slides after the broadcast. The lines are currently muted. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it in the question panel. Today's session is scheduled for 45 minutes. We expect the presentation to last approximately 30 minutes and will allot any extra time for Q&A. If we do not have time to address all questions, we will follow up afterwards with any attendee whose question was not answered. And now, without further ado, here's Ken.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you for all you folks out there who are attending. Certainly glad to see the crowd for the session. And what I'm going to be talking about today is some of the new strategies for database modernization. We certainly see a lot of pressure on businesses today to move their business to the next level, and data management is a key component of that. And so therefore, they're looking for ways to modernize their database infrastructure and the systems around that will really help that. And in particular, I'm going to be focusing on some of the areas around where open source databases can really have an impact to help in that journey. So the way I'm going to kind of arrange this and organize the discussion, I'm going to first talk about a particular challenge facing businesses today. We'll go through some of those challenges and the reasons why those are impacting the productivity and this pace of innovation at companies that we've been talking to. Talk about how those are changing in the modern world and how digitization is going to help in the business, and then talk a bit about where the role that open source databases play in that transformation. And then we'll be talking about specifically for any of you who are from the financial services area, some of our customers in the financial services vertical that are taking advantage of these strategies to tackle these challenges and address some of these issues by embracing some of the approaches that we're going to cover. So the first area that I'm going to talk to is kind of legacy systems. Legacy systems, obviously have a lot of value to the business. Otherwise, it would be easy to get rid of them. They're certainly have a lot of special capabilities that hit, but they, at the same time, they can drag down a business and they can slow down a business because they tend to not be easily changeable, and they can end up being a bit brittle. And in particular, when you look at custom applications and custom systems within businesses, this is one of the most common places where you see legacy systems. Over the years, most businesses have built up the infrastructure and the applications that they need to run their business. Some of that is off the shelf, and in those cases, those applications may evolve and move forward in time. But the ones that have been built in-house have a kind of an extra challenge, because you have to have the staff on board that can continue to move these things forward. They tend to get hit by budget challenges a lot more rapidly in many cases, because it's easy to cut the staff that's responsible for a particular project or an application in-house that's being targeted, and then never get back to it, because once you lose the expertise and once you lose that skill set, it's hard to overcome that. And you find that especially in vertical industries, again, because the applications may have been produced specifically to address use cases and the idiosyncrasies of a given application within an industry. Again, the finance, the ways you do build the models for a financial services organization are going to be somewhat different than those for a government organization or a telecommunications provider. And therefore, this always leads to a draw to build more of these custom systems. But again, it does often create a legacy that is really hard to unwind once it's become entrenched in the organization. Another thing that often occurs with organizations and legacy systems is that they end up being built out of very complicated layers of solutions. And this is a little bit related to the previous one, because you may start with a custom built app that was developed internally, or you may start out with a third-party application. But then in the drive to enhance that and make it more appropriate for the particular use cases, the particular applications within the organization, you build up layers upon that. They may be integration to other internal systems, they may be integrations or bridges to external systems, partner systems, or even SaaS solutions that you're trying to integrate your internal in-house solutions with. Unfortunately, because you have so many moving parts, it creates greater complexity and increases the risk around removing any one of those parts or moving it or trying to modernize. And again, but at the same time, it's often done because you're trying to maintain those legacy systems, so you don't have to remove them and take them out. So you just build up a layer upon layer of complexity that just makes each layer that much harder to address. And when it comes to the point where you really need to get to a more modern platform. And another area that's really critical as well, it's not just your systems that may be legacy, it's the skill sets of the team. And again, I think there's always a challenge where you're trying to find ways to make your organization very compelling. You want to bring in the best and brightest from the industry. They're not going to know those existing systems. At the same time, you want to keep all your great people that you have on staff and that have built those systems, but you want to give them new challenges. So they can oftentimes, even those folks that had at one time experience with those systems, maybe they were the original authors of those systems, they have moved on to other projects and other places in the organization where perhaps those, where they no longer have the time or energy or maybe even remember how those systems fit together exactly. And so it leaves a gap and creates a problem in trying to modernize those things. And it's not just the applications and understanding that how to build them or modernize them or what the architecture is. It's also all the operational processes around that. So again, even just knowing what are the requirements in those systems in order to ensure that the data is being maintained consistently, and that there is a way of recovering in terms of in the case of a disaster, and you need to recover the data. In the case of eliminating downtime, and you may have to fail over to a redundant system, and making sure that you have all the systems in place at an operational level to keep those systems operating at peak efficiency. And again, that's kind of one of the reasons why these kind of legacy systems create really a slowdown in the ability to move the organization forward. So how can open source help? And I think there's a number of ways that open source can help in terms of helping to unwind that legacy and that legacy in the organization. The first thing is that many times the open source systems that are being made available in the marketplace actually have tooling and are coming into the market with an understanding that yes, indeed, you have these legacy systems and that you are going to want to modernize them, and therefore they build some additional capabilities around them for migration. And they also oftentimes build in some capabilities for compatibility. Now, this is certainly true with EDB Postgres, where we've invested extensively for compatibility with Oracle and have a number of different migration toolkits that allow you to migrate your applications and your data forward. But that kind of capability is really critical because it allows you to move those applications while reducing and minimizing the risk, because the less you have to actually change the core application itself, and if the underlying system can manage that compatibility for you, it just makes everything much simpler because you have that many fewer changes to the application, to the systems, to the environment that you have to fight with and struggle with when you're moving forward, which again reduces the amount of risk that you have to account for. In addition, open source also has another opportunity because it can help you with, it can give you multiple ways of deploying. One of the big advantages of moving on to open source systems these days is that many of them have been designed and evolved and built with the cloud in mind and with new DevOps development cycles in mind in terms of how they're deployed. And so therefore, if you look at Postgres, it can be deployed in containers, it can be deployed as database as service on many different public clouds or in private clouds. It gives you the ability to move that. So it allows you to, at the same time, taking advantage of the compatibility and the ability to move your application forward, but also at the operations, at the execution and administration layer, move into the next generation of systems. So you can really modernize that part of your business and that part of the organization to take advantage of the latest and greatest of tools that are available. So one great example that we have in terms of a customer that's really taken advantage of this move and this transition is Clear Capital. They have a large existing application. Clear Capital is actually, it's a company that is really, its foundation is data driven. They have information on about 120 million properties worldwide. They've got 15 million appraisals on any given year. Really, they're tracking about 90% of the total properties in the US. So it's really a lot of data, 15 billion valuations in the overall database. So lots of data. That's really what, really is a lot of the capital in the Clear Capital is in this particular application. The application here is the Home Data Index. It's a mission critical application. They've got 300 internal users and 10 to 20,000 external vendors are operating and interacting with that worldwide. They needed a way to move that application, modernize that application, because of course they live in a very competitive industry where there are new players and new companies coming in to compete with them. And at the same time, they needed to be able to move into a more agile motion and be able to upgrade and operate more effectively at the same time, because it is so mission critical, because the application is so critical to their business. They can't take the risk. So they didn't want to be changing 90% of their code or rewriting everything. They wanted something that would help them maintain the stability around their system, at the same time moving it forward into the next generation of productivity. And that's really what they did. One of the great side benefits when they actually adopted Postgres in this case to replace Oracle was that they found that actually as you might imagine, when they're tracking properties and real estate around the United States, that GIS and being able to map where all that property is and where all those assets are is very important. And what they found was that the GIS capabilities within Postgres were actually more advanced than what they were seeing within Oracle itself. So they actually got the side benefit of being able to take advantage of more modern infrastructure on that particular piece of the data modeling. The next challenge that I'm going to talk about, and I sort of touched on this in the last one, is new customer expectations. Of course, in the world is moving forward as quickly as it is, we're in an on-demand world. All customers are expecting to interact. Every new startup coming out is coming up with a better, a faster, better answer to the problems of the day. And existing businesses have to find a way of competing with those new upstarts and newcomers into the industry. At the same time, most companies are also not the biggest incumbent in the planet either. And so they have to be able to also at the same time compete with the reliability and dependability of those very large organizations as a competition. So it makes for, the everyday company, the typical company that probably most of us all live in, makes it a challenge, because you have to be able to, on the one hand, innovate at the speed of the upstarts, and at the same time be able to provide the same qualities of service and dependability and reliability of the big industry leaders. So again, in this world of the disruptive startups and big companies, and there's many expectations are being driven. Again, one of the big things there is the high availability. Certainly in a world where you're dealing with the biggest companies in the world, they're going to be driving you to that kind of availability and 5 nines type of access, or 3 or 4 nines anyway. And that can certainly be a challenge if you don't have the right data infrastructure to be able to deliver those kind of consistency and a high availability and data availability to your users. Another aspect of this is really the self-service 24/7 ability for customers to interact with your applications. And this is one that probably comes a little bit more from the upstarts, and the big companies sometimes even struggle with providing that really high quality user experience to their customers, apapplications that don't have the legacy that we were talking about earlier, but instead are built kind of native for the cloud and for a web or mobile based interface, are in a situation where they can provide a very compelling user experience with that self-service on-demand application. So therefore, this kind of drives you to the point where you want to say, how can I have scalable access to the data, the ability to increase the workload, because if it's self-service, you never know when your customers might want to interact with your system, and you want to make sure that your system is going to be ready whenever that is, and no matter whether it's 90% of your user base or 10% of the user base that is wanting to interact with the system at that point in time. So this is can be very challenging unless you have a very agile kind of data architecture to drive that. And another one, in addition to that kind of very interactive, always-on enterprise, the actual experience of the user is also becoming much more sophisticated and very personalized. This is again something that both big companies and small are driving to create a richer experience for all of the customers that are coming to interact with the system. It allows you to better target them. It allows you to create a more compelling customer relationship to maintain your customers more effectively. It also means that perhaps you can offer them more services and more capabilities and increase the amount of revenue that you're driving from those customers by delivering them a richer experience with more services available. So again, this is another way that innovation is forcing companies to change and move to digitalization of their core assets, and driving away from some of those legacy systems we were talking about before. So once again, how does an open source database and open source in general help in meeting those kind of new expectations? Well, a part of that is around having agility around the data platform. This goes a bit to what I was describing earlier when we were talking about the plugging in your database lifecycle and being able to deploy with technologies such as containers and cloud and database as a service, and being able to have the ability to launch simple databases in many cases. With this kind of a platform, you can do things like launch analytical databases or data warehouses that are launched on a single server and drive that and drive new insights in a very quick and easy way, and drive new innovations and insights into your business. It's also another key element of open source databases because of the innovation, and this is a place where Postgres in particular shines, is providing with more flexibility in how you model your data and provide an architecture that goes beyond just simply rows and tables. Certainly Postgres has had JSON support, and from a document model, it gives you flexibility in terms of having a dynamic schema. Of course, you may not want to use a dynamic schema for all your applications, so therefore you can use that kind of JSON document for some of the information, while also having the more structured information that is going to be queried much more frequently and needs to be optimized for reporting can be structured in tables. So it gives you kind of the best of both worlds in that case. Also, if you can take advantage of an open source database in this way, it lets you focus on innovation. And that's something that we hear every day from our customers, is that again, it's not just that I want to spend less on the database or work less on the database or reduce the effort. It's that all of that time that's being done on the mundane tasks could really instead be much more impactful if you could refocus that investment on innovation. And not only that, but it's obviously much more it's a much more fun thing for the team to be working on, and much more compelling for the group, and much more impactful for the business as well. One of our customers that has seen a lot of value in this is actually one of our a company that's in the capital markets and in operating stock market technology and delivering that. They were in a place where they really wanted to have a standard way of building their systems and standard way of building the applications that actually support those trades in an equity market. It is obviously that's an environment that needs to be highly reliable, and also very performant, because you can't wait on a stock trade. So it needs to be able to have a database that's very robust in terms of its ability to support robust data integrity and data permanence and those kind of things, but at the same time give them the ability to innovate and evolve and provide some level of innovation in the world. They certainly, one of the values that they see is the connection to a real community and Postgres. They saw one of the reasons why they chose to embrace Postgres was the amount of innovation they were seeing in the Postgres community relative to what they were seeing coming out of the more traditional enterprise vendors in the database space. And so that was really something that really drove them. In addition to the cost savings, of course, is oftentimes a theme is that folks are looking for innovation and driving more, being able to change things and be able to improve their solutions rapidly to meet customer needs. But the cost savings are also certainly something that they're looking at. Which brings us to challenge number 3: budget and resources. So as you can certainly, this is an area where that comes forward all the time when people are looking at their business and how they operate and what they can do to move things forward, because there's never more money than you know what to do with in practice. You're always on a constraints because the business is always trying to do more with less. One of the challenges with traditional database management systems is that they do tend to have a very high cost of ownership, and that comes from a number of different things. Certainly they consume quite a few resources, so the machines and the systems that they're running on require a lot of resources and a lot of costs. The actual licensing of traditional database software can be extremely expensive, as I'm sure you're all aware, and that's something that again, open source can provide a lot of relief to. But as you can certainly, there's a lot of things that come into this, and certainly having the expertise across a number of different diverse data platform, and the expertise both to develop applications using these data systems and the ability to maintain and operate them, creates a lot of challenges for businesses when they're looking at their budgets and trying to constrain those costs. And of course, all organizations are being asked to do more with less. No one's asking you to do less with more. That's just not something that happens. So the key here is, you're looking for ways to create more value, more business value, while spending less, and certainly that's always going to be a challenge when you're tied into legacy systems that kind of set a baseline where that cost structure is just really inflexible, and it's just hard to move it when there's just a baseline and you can't get out of that trap. And then again, of course, teams have a limited amount of capability of talent and resources to accomplish new projects. There's never going to be too many people, so it's also a skill set issue, because again, for any given task, you may have team and resources available in some areas, but not the ones you need for a specific area. So again, having the flexibility and the agility to move that talent and resources around across projects, and also can really have a large impact on how those limited amount of resources can actually be applied and impact the business. So once again, how does open source help with these budget constraints and limitations of resources? Well, the most obvious thing is that open source really gives you a much lower total cost of ownership. Again, with open source, just the entire subscription cost is generally much lower than even the maintenance cost and support costs of a traditional heavyweight enterprise licensed database system. It also generally has a much lower chance of locking you in. I think one of the reasons why costs have gotten to the point of running away from enterprises these days in the world of proprietary database vendors is that the applications really are locked in to a single vendor, and it's really hard to move out of those spaces. Modulo the discussion earlier about migration and the tooling and on that side. I think one of the things people need to watch for moving forward is also the database vendor lock-in that everybody knows and hates with the folks that have been building proprietary database solutions for all these years, is now just along with everybody else, that challenge is also migrating to the cloud. As the cloud vendors are looking for ways to ensure that you stay within their cloud, and they want to have that same kind of control of the business as the traditional vendors. So something to be watching for as those cloud vendors evolve into a even more dominant position. It is true that most of the open source can work for most use cases. Open source software in most of these cases are very mature and very robust. There are going to be corner cases. There are going to be areas where there may be places where more specialized software is needed. For example, in the area of systems that absolutely require the availability and the right scalability of a system like Oracle RAC, it's a very unique solution, and one that, on the one hand can offer a lot of value to business, and certainly we recognize that being from the open source side, you recognize the value in those alternative solutions that do have a lot of proprietary value built into them. But at the same time, once you kind of agree that you're going to build that requirement into your system and aren't going to find a way to work around it, it does kind of accelerate that lock-in that we were discussing as well. And of course, again, because it's moving from a license, kind of a fixed license cost into annual subscription with most open source software or a support agreement, it lets you move capital expense to operational expense. And similarly, if you're moving into a cloud environment where you pay as you go, those kind of things for many businesses is more attractive. So one of the customers that we have that's kind of is really benefiting a lot from that kind of budgeting benefits is ABN AMRO, and they basically implemented a global policy to use open source wherever feasible, and kind of really driving that through the organization. And if you don't know ABN AMRO, this is in particular the clearing business within ABN AMRO, where they're really the global leader of derivatives and equity clearing. They provide to their users global market access, and they have clearing services in more than 85 countries and across 85 exchanges worldwide, and operate their services in 12 locations. So really around the world kind of operation with 99.97 availability. So again, we're in another situation where the availability of the solution is really critical. They need to have a system that can where they could easily move from those legacy Oracle systems, and they need to save money. And really, EDB Postgres was able to deliver a solution that really fit exactly into that package, and it's been very successful within their organization. The final challenge I've got here is kind of establishing the right culture. And I think this is a place where you have to look at as you move away from those legacy systems, as you move into a digital transformation, you have to make sure that your organization is ready for that. And if you look at risk aversion, you can't go overboard in that. You obviously want to be cautious of risk and manage risk, and you want to be aware of the risks that are out there. But at the same time, you also have to be aware of the risks of not moving, because again, those competitive situations we were talking about earlier create a situation where if you just never do anything, you're really taking on more risk than if you left everything the same. So it's really important to manage that risk and think about how you're going to change the culture within your organization to be able to live within the risk and really do a risk assessment of all the risks involved in the organization. Another key thing for the culture is cross-departmental collaboration. Again, it's not just about the DBA team or the development team. A lot of groups, I'm sure, of you listening are moving in DevOps, but it's not just DevOps either. It's about how do you get the business involved in the decision process, and how do you integrate them? I mean, I think one of the things I've seen, certainly a growth in the amount of DevOps and automation around the development and operations within organizations as they evolve their IT teams. But at the same time, while that's going on, the business side is during that transformation has made a completely different decision, has chosen a SaaS solution where the IT team isn't even involved. So again, I think it's a matter of looking at how across an entire organization you can really create a joint decision making and a collaboration in what I've seen working is agile teams that really go across all functions within the business. And then to identify partners. Again, it's not just the team within your four walls, it's also the teams that you can bring in that can help you move that, and make sure that those teams are a good cultural fit with this transformation that you're going through. And really, I say here a good cultural fit, but it's actually a good cultural fit for what you're trying to become in many cases, not just what you have been in the past. So, hopefully your partners are actually helping you move forward on this transformation, not just helping you stay with the legacy and kind of reinforcing the patterns that you've had in your past. And again, I think this is something that open source culture is really core to its being. There's the community is really driving innovation in this area, and it's driving an agile business model, and the development teams within the communities and the groups are really working in this kind of motion. So again, I think it's getting your teams involved in open source and getting them aware of open source and the operations of open source can really help encourage and reinforce some of these cultural aspects. So with that, it's just a little bit of an understanding of where EDB fits in all this. We are the world leader in open source based Postgres software and services. We're recognized by the leading analyst firms. Been around since 2004. Lots of customers, 300 people worldwide, and are really the PostgreSQL community leader. We're really proud of that. The fact that we have the most contributions to the Postgres community. We have the leadership on the core team. But at the same time, we're also very proud of the fact that Postgres is a real community project, and that we collaborate with some of those folks that might otherwise think of as competitors. And that's again, being able to lead that community, but at the same time collaborate, I think is a real strength of the company. We do, mention 4,000 customers worldwide, some great logos, some great names, maybe even see yourselves on some of these spots. And again, we have been recognized for 6 years in a row within the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And again, I think this is one where when you look at the companies that are really driving the Magic Quadrant or being recognized by analysts, Gartner has narrowed its focus really a lot over the past few years to say, look, you don't need 87 different databases in your organization. You need a few, and the more you can consolidate workloads, the more efficient, and in fact, the more agile and more effective you can be in your transformation. And that's why they've kind of culled the herd and narrowed this down and focus. And at EDB, we're very proud to know that we continue to be an important part of that. Mention the community leadership and our contributions. These are some of the names of the folks that from EDB that are core team, major contributors, and committers to the project. And finally, if you look at the project and the products that we offer, we do offer Postgres, the community version that provides really what we believe is the best in class open source relational database on the market and in the community. We extend that with advanced security and performance and availability features within the core database. We also wrap that in a number of tool suites, from integration, migration, and management, again, making it easy to get out of those legacy systems and integrate with those legacy systems, because in many cases you can't eliminate them all day, and also having a management suite that allows you to retain the skill sets of your existing team. If they're familiar with enterprise tooling, they can still have that kind of experience within an open source arena. And then the ability to have the flexibility of deployment options across the board, from public or private cloud to your more traditional bare metal or virtualized environments, or moving forward, we're seeing more and more people deploy into containers to create a more agile environment. And then, of course, that's all supported by the services team around that for 24/7 support, and also professional service to help with the architecture and driving things forward. So with that, that's the end of our structured presentation, and we can move on to some question and discussion. Courtney, do you have any questions coming in during the session, or?
Let's see. Thank you, Ken. It looks like right now we only have one question. Someone wants to know where they could get more information on the case studies you went over.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. So if you go to the Enterprise DB website, if you go to the resources area, you can download any of those case studies and lots more. so those ones were ones that are specifically targeting the financial services area. So you can find those in our resource area, and along with lots of other case studies, both in financial services and in a number of different other industries, depending on kind of what's most applicable to your use cases. But that'd be the best way to find that, and that's a really great resource.
Great, thanks. That looks like all the questions we actually have for today. So thank you everyone for joining us for the webinar. We'll be sharing this recording along with the slides with you as soon as possible. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks.